Hi and welcome. In this lecture, we will focus on the development of an EU governance framework in the field of artificial intelligence, with a special emphasis on its ethical component. Special attention will be given to the recent Commission's proposal for an Artificial Intelligence Act and the work of the European Parliament in this field, and discuss whether the pervasive, growing, and disruptive character of these technologies fits well with the established EU institutional and legal framework. The talk will touch upon the policy attempts to frame an ethical regime on artificial intelligence and shape this disruptive technological sector in a human-centric way, as well as on the main challenges associated with the mushrooming of ethical initiatives worldwide and the limitations of domestic law in this domain. I am Michalis Kritikos, Principal Advisor on Digital Issues for Eva Kaili, Chair of the Science and Technology Panel of the European Parliament, and Fellow of the Research Center on Digitalization, Democracy and Innovation at the Brussels School of Governance. In this lecture, I will argue that, first, artificial intelligence poses manifold and horizontal risks and challenges that require immediate governance solutions. Secondly, that the response to the AI challenges have taken many forms already, especially at the EU level. In this lecture, I will give a snapshot of the main EU responses to the AI control challenge, focusing on regulation and ethics. Importantly, I will argue that we shouldn't count on ethics only to make the AI governance challenge disappear. Thirdly, that international governance solutions should be sought immediately. Why do we need to control and govern AI? The opportunities and risks of artificial intelligence seem limitless. While some believe that many of the most challenging problems of this world can be solved through or with the help of AI, others, such as Bill Gates, consider this technology also a risk, alike to atomic power and atomic weapons. There is growing concern that the citizens are gradually losing control over the data that are exploited by vast digital infrastructures and that AI-powered decisions are based on biased algorithmic processes. An entire ecosystem of artificial intelligence-powered algorithmic-driven apps is controlling huge data flows, are commodifying our data, and is treating technology users as data suppliers via the imposition of default choice architectures. There are concerns that this increasing digitization with the help of AI may lead to augmented surveillance, massive digital dependence, and high epistemic asymmetries, inequalities within our health systems, which is a critical concern that is dragging the technology's limitations back into the spotlight. Biased results can lead to breaches of our fundamental rights, from our freedom of expression or association. See, for example, the effects of indiscriminate surveillance made by facial recognition systems, to non-discrimination, especially when AI-biased decisions are based on racial or ethnic origin, religion, disability, age, or sexual orientation, for instance in the access to employment or being approved a loan. Artificial intelligence poses new risks for human rights, as diverse as privacy, security, freedom of expression, the right to work, and access to public services. There are a number of reasons why AI appears as a threat and as a source of risks. First of all, there are concerns that humans may become objects of machine control. At the same time, there are no established methodologies yet to track the effects and the harm on human rights, to identify who is being excluded from AI systems, and to assess the potential for discrimination in the use of machine learning. Artificial intelligence can also be embedded in autonomous machines which may cross borders in trade, crime, or military operations, thus combining classical physical safety and security risks with the new risks that AI poses. Any AI systems are less capable of indicating their motivation for decisions, rendering the tracing of data and algorithmic decision-making systems almost impossible, leading to the so-called black box phenomenon. The lack of transparency and explainability regarding the terms and operations and conditions of the operation of these AI systems to allow the users to interpret the system's output and use it appropriately constitutes another major risk that adds to the complexity of governing this disruptive technology. AI's machine learning is dependent on data from fragmented digital markets that have not been trained and audited properly, thus leading to a replication of structural biases. The concentration of the data processing power and of the technological means in the hands of a very small group of private actors has further accentuated informational asymmetries and data manipulative practices, which in effect undermines consumer protection, privacy, and human dignity. AI can even threaten the stability of our political systems, as it has been criticized for creating online echo chambers based on a person's previous online behavior, whereas the extensive use of deepfakes can lead to financial risks, harm reputation, and polarization in the public sphere. Some of the major AI risks that require immediate ethical and legal action are social scoring, predictive policing, manipulation of users' perception and behavior, and deep learning algorithms. Against this background, EU policymakers are not only increasingly concerned about the trustworthiness and the sustainability of our digital economy, but are also taking the necessary initiatives to develop common legal rules, binding legal standards, and ethical norms before the growing datafication of our societies dismantles the fundamentals of our democracy. The European Parliament has been the first EU institution to emphasize the need to look at the ethical aspects of artificial intelligence since 2016, when members of the European Parliament started working on a resolution on the ethical and legal aspects of robotics. The European Parliament has become the main EU agenda setter in this domain, given that its 2017 resolution on civil law rules on robotics urged the European Commission to analyze and evaluate the ethical impacts of AI, and triggered a series of initiatives at the European Commission level, including the establishment of the high-level expert group on AI. The resolution put forward a Magna Carta for AI ethics that comprised a code of ethical conduct for robotics engineers, a code for research ethics committees, a model license agreement for designers, and a model license agreement for users. That resolution was followed in 2019 by the adoption of a non-initiative report on a comprehensive European industrial policy on artificial intelligence and robotics that placed a significant focus on ethical issues and specifically included a large section on ethical aspects. The resolution reinforced the European Parliament's emphasis on the need for EU action in the ethical terrain and brought forward 4 sets of issues in relation to the ethical discussion: the issue of human-centric technology, the need to embed values in technology, so to follow an ethics by design approach, decision-making limits to the autonomy of artificial intelligence and robotics, and fourthly, the need for transparency and explainability of algorithms. In addition to that, on 20 October 2020, the European Parliament adopted a resolution that was exclusively focused on AI ethics. The resolution contains several guiding principles that must be taken into account by future laws, including a human-centric, human-made, and human-controlled artificial intelligence. The resolution focuses on safeguards against bias and discrimination, the right to redress, social and environmental responsibility, and the need to respect fundamental rights, and emphasizes also the need for human oversight at all stages of AI development. Last but not least, the European Parliament decided recently to set up a Center for AI next to the STOA panel and a new special committee on artificial intelligence in a digital age to assess the impact of AI, to investigate its challenges, to analyze the approach of non-EU countries such as China and US, and define common EU objectives in the medium and long term. The European Commission has established its policy on artificial intelligence through a series of initiatives. In a 2018 communication, the European Commission set out an EU approach to AI, addressing the socio-economic, ethical, and legal aspects. In April 2019, based on the idea that trust is a prerequisite to ensuring a human-centric approach, the European Commission published non-binding guidelines on ethics in AI, which set out 7 key requirements that AI systems should meet in order to be trustworthy. The guidelines were prepared by a high-level expert group on artificial intelligence appointed by the Commission to provide advice on its artificial intelligence strategy. The group, composed of 52 experts, brought together representatives from academia, civil society, as well as industry, appointed by the EU to support the implementation of the European strategy on artificial intelligence. The most visible trademark of the EU approach to AI governance is arguably the concept of trustworthy AI. According to the expert group guidelines, trustworthiness in AI means that a system should be lawful, meaning to respect all applicable laws and regulations, ethical, to respect ethical principles and values, and robust, both from a technical perspective while taking into account its social environment. The guidelines do provide more detail on what it means for an AI system to respect ethical principles and values, outlining 7 key requirements that AI systems should meet in order to be deemed trustworthy: human agency and oversight, technical robustness and safety, privacy and data governance, transparency, diversity, non-discrimination and fairness, societal and environmental well-being, and accountability. Building on its first deliverable, the expert group put forward 33 recommendations to guide trustworthy AI towards sustainability, growth, competitiveness, and inclusion. At the same time, the recommendations will empower, benefit, and protect European citizens. The group also developed the final assessment list for trustworthy AI, the so-called ALT-AI, which is a practical tool that translates the ethics guidelines into an accessible and dynamic self-assessment checklist. The checklist can be used by developers and deployers of AI who want to implement the key requirements. Furthermore, in a February 2020 white paper on artificial intelligence, named A European Approach to Excellence and Trust, the Commission highlighted the need for a coordinated approach and proposed policy options for a future EU regulatory framework on AI. In that paper, the European Commission identified 2 key components that will allow such an AI ecosystem to develop in a way that benefits EU society as a whole: excellence and trust. In response to AI dangers, the European Union is working on a legal framework to regulate artificial intelligence. Recently, the European Commission proposed its first ever legal framework on artificial intelligence. This pioneering proposal is the result of a long and complicated work carried out by the European Commission services. The EU's first draft regulation on AI, which is following a risk-based approach, is part of a wider effort to develop a human-centric AI by eliminating mistakes and biases to ensure it is safe and trustworthy. The proposed regulation includes requirements to minimize the risk of algorithmic discrimination, in particular in relation to the quality of datasets used for the development of AI systems. It also introduces human oversight of certain AI systems to prevent or minimize risks to health, safety, or fundamental rights that may emerge when an AI system is used. According to the draft regulation, providers of AI systems must establish appropriate data governance and management practices and must use datasets that are relevant, representative, free of errors, and complete. The proposed regulation makes the ex-ante addressing and ex-post monitoring of bias mandatory. The datasets of high-risk AI systems will be subject to examination in view of possible biases. The draft regulation requires also providers to employ a range of techniques to datasets that are used in the training, validation, and testing of machine learning and similar technologies. The proposal, which is now in the hands of the Parliament and the Council, is on the right direction, but EU legislators may still need to work more on the definition of bias and risks, the development of risk assessment methodologies, of data hygiene methodologies, addressing non-data related bias, the development of participatory methodologies in data design, and the establishment of testing facilities across representative European regions. There have been over the last decade numerous attempts to create an ethics of artificial intelligence. Corporations developing AI in order to shoulder the responsibilities and to give orientation to their own engineers, but also states and multilateral organizations such as OECD either to prepare or to substitute legislation, have driven these efforts. There are now more than 80 catalogs, codes of conduct, and lists of charters for ethics of AI. Many of their principles overlap in general, but there are also many differences in important details and normative value. Some of the ethics codes of conduct have been accompanied by self-governance structures within corporations. However, some of these structures have been abandoned again or have been criticized as being ineffective and superficial. There is also an emerging concern among business about free riders who will not commit to voluntary codes of ethics and or develop their own AI systems in places where ethics frameworks are non-existent or relaxed, thus putting into question the level playing field of markets and competition. Some ethics committees have called for the need for law to be put in place in order to ensure the democratic legitimacy, social acceptability, and binding nature of AI ethics governance rules. Considering the high potentials as well as high risks associated with AI and the concerns relating to a level playing field for AI, there is an acknowledgement that those risks cannot be mitigated using only ethics codes, voluntary ethics certification schemes, and self-regulation. So we need a bold political and legal response that prioritizes the protection of fundamental rights by laying down red lines and strict obligations. EU's AI ethics guidelines can definitely serve as a basis and as a normative point of reference, but need to be operationalized and enforced in legal and organizational terms. Since 2019, successive exercises of consensus building on principles for AI have demonstrated that a global consensus is possible. While none of these texts is binding, the adoption of more than 80 codes on AI ethics shows that the international community is learning about the opportunities and the risks of AI, and that there is a significant conceptual and political convergence. In 2019, the OECD Council adopted a series of recommendations on artificial intelligence, whereas its AI ethics principles were adopted by the G20. More recently, in July 2021, the UNESCO representatives of member states agreed on a draft recommendation on AI governance to be submitted to the General Conference of UNESCO member states in November 2021 for adoption. UNESCO is now calling for an international regulatory framework to ensure that AI benefits humanity as a whole. It is important to consider this cross-border, global, and multi-purpose nature of AI in any attempt to assess risks and opportunities of this technology. The world has become a community of risk, not only relating to COVID, but also relating to AI. It is therefore necessary to give an impetus to the international community and the United Nations to start working on a global legally binding multilateral agreement on the governance of AI and deliver an inclusive and human-centered framework. In conclusion then, what are the key takeaways of this lecture, and what are the next steps? Firstly, the challenge of AI governance is manifold. In this lecture, we briefly discussed some of the main risks of AI. I also argued that its risks cross national borders and question the ability of legal systems and ethical frameworks to deal with this disruptive technology. Secondly, the AI governance problem has attracted the attention of EU regulators already that have placed special attention to the adoption of ethics guidelines and the formulation of an AI Act. Thirdly, the solution to AI challenges cannot be domestic only. The EU may have positioned itself as a frontrunner in the global debate on AI governance and ethics, but more needs to be done in order to reach a global agreement. So, all major stakeholders need to work towards a global agreement that should be open to all interested stakeholders, but run by the UN Secretary General and a group of lead states and an effective and proactive secretariat. This initiative should aim to identify existing principles under international law and under international human rights law in specific, which may be put in question or suffer in their implementation from AI, and develop the legal rules and mechanisms that are necessary to address these challenges. This concludes my lecture. Thanks for watching.